Mason sat alone in the cockpit of his small research ship. The screens glowed softly, showing maps of stars he had never seen before. His mission was to scan this quiet corner of space, record data, and return home. It was supposed to be simple. But Mason was never good at ignoring curiosity. The ship drifted above a strange, dark planet. No name had ever been given to this place. To Mason, that made it feel even more important. He watched the sensors flicker, waiting for any sign of movement. Just when he was about to turn away, a soft beep echoed across the console. A signal was coming from the surface. Mason leaned closer, reading the data carefully. The signal was weak, almost broken, like a voice trying to call out through water. He checked the frequency twice. It was not human. It was something old, something that had been sending this message for a long time. He pressed the come button on his wrist. "Control, this is Mason. I have detected a distress signal on planet surface. Requesting permission to land and investigate." The speaker stayed silent for several seconds. Finally, a tired voice answered. "Mason, your orders are to map the system only. Do not approach unknown signals." Mason looked out at the empty stars. He thought about the voice in the static, reaching across centuries for help. He turned off the comm. "Sorry," he whispered. "I have to see this." He guided the ship down through the thick clouds. The engines hummed as the hull shook gently. Outside the window, the dark shapes of mountains rose like sleeping giants. As the ship landed on a flat stretch of black stone, Mason's heart began to pound. He felt like he was stepping into a secret place where no other human had walked. He put on his suit and helmet, checking the oxygen twice. When the hatch opened, cold air rushed in, making him shiver. He climbed down and turned on his light. Dust swirled in the beam, and broken walls stretched into the darkness. He had landed in what looked like an ancient city. The buildings were built from dark crystal and metal. Some towers were still standing, though cracked and leaning. Others had fallen into heaps. Mason felt a deep sadness as he walked between them. Whoever had lived here was long gone. The signal grew stronger as he followed the path. It led him to the largest building at the center of the ruins. Two statues guarded the doorway, tall figures with long robes and smooth, graceful faces. He paused, feeling as if their empty eyes were watching him. Inside, the air was heavy and cold. Strange symbols were carved into the walls. Some glowed softly, as if trying to speak to him in a language he could never understand. The signal was coming from a chamber at the end of the hall. Mason pushed open a cracked metal door. His light swept across the floor and stopped. In the middle of the room stood a tall, clear capsule. A figure floated inside, suspended in a pale blue liquid. He stepped closer, unable to believe what he was seeing. It was a woman. Her skin was silver and smooth, almost shining under his light. Her hair drifted around her face like fine silk. Her eyes were closed. She looked peaceful, as if she were only sleeping. He saw thin cables running from the capsule into the walls, still pulsing with a faint glow. Mason touched the glass. A chill ran through his glove. He searched the capsule for any sign of controls. His fingers found a small panel near the base. Symbols lit up as he brushed the surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her eyes opened. Mason jerked his hand back in shock. She stared at him, her pupils narrow like a cat's. Slowly her lips moved, but no sound came out. He tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. The woman raised one hand and pressed it against the inside of the glass. Her eyes were pleading. He took a deep breath. "I don't understand you," he said softly. "But I think you need help." Carefully, he pressed more symbols on the panel. A soft hiss filled the chamber. The blue liquid began to drain away. The woman shivered as the fluid sank past her shoulders. When the capsule finally opened, she fell forward into Mason's arms. She was cold and light, like a bundle of dry leaves. She looked up into his face and tried to speak again. Her voice was a thin whisper, broken by long sleep. He could only catch a few words, but they were enough to fill him with wonder. Double quotes. Bond. Her fingers touched his forehead. A warmth flooded his mind, washing away every other thought. For a second, he felt her memories, a bright city under twin suns, a chorus of voices singing in a language he had never heard. Then the vision vanished, leaving only her tired eyes and the echo of her voice. Mason staggered back, his heart hammering. He looked down at his palm. A small mark had appeared there, glowing with a soft blue light. He tried to rub it away, but it stayed. The woman took a shaky breath and spoke again. Her words clearer this time. "The bond is complete," she said in a quiet voice. "Now we can't escape each other." Mason felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. He knew, without understanding how, that his life had just changed forever. He looked around the dark chamber, at the walls covered in forgotten language, and back at the silver-skinned woman clinging to him. He swallowed, trying to steady his voice. "Who are you?" Her gaze held his. She seemed as lost as he was. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she closed her eyes, resting her head against his chest. He could feel her thoughts brushing against his own like a faint breeze. Mason stood in the silent ruins, holding a stranger who was no longer a stranger. The signal had called him here, but he knew it was not just a distress call. It was an invitation and a warning. And now, there was no turning back. Mason held the silver-skinned woman in his arms, feeling her cold body slowly begin to warm. For a moment, he forgot he was standing in the ruins of a dead city. All he could think about was the strange bond between them. He looked again at the blue mark glowing on his palm. It felt as if it was pulsing with her heartbeat. He helped her sit against the wall. Her breathing was shallow, but she opened her eyes and watched him carefully, as if she was studying every movement. Mason reached into his pack and pulled out a small blanket. He draped it over her shoulders. She touched the fabric with a weak hand and seemed surprised by its softness. "Can you understand me?" he asked slowly. Her mouth moved, but the words were in her own language, full of smooth musical sounds. He shook his head. "I don't know what you're saying." She looked frustrated. She pressed her hand over her heart, then touched her forehead. Her eyes locked on his, and he felt a wave of emotion, fear, sadness, and something that felt like hope. The bond was real, and it was more than just a mark on his skin. It was a link between their minds. Mason felt dizzy. He sat down beside her and tried to catch his breath. He thought about what she had said in the capsule. "The bond is complete. Now we can't escape each other." Did that mean he was trapped? Was she? He did not know. All he knew was that she needed help, and he was the only person here to give it. Slowly, she raised her hand and touched the glowing mark on his palm. As her fingers brushed his skin, a bright image flashed in his mind. He saw her standing in a shining hall, surrounded by others who looked like her. They were smiling, holding hands, their eyes bright with pride. He felt her joy, her sense of purpose. Then the image turned to dark flames consuming the hall, screams echoing, shadows moving through the smoke. A deep sadness wrapped around his heart. The vision faded. Mason gasped and pulled his hand away. She looked at him with sorrow in her eyes. She pointed to herself and spoke one word, clear and strong. "Tara." He repeated it slowly. "Tara." She nodded. Then she pointed to him with a questioning look. "Mason," he said. "My name is Mason." Her lips moved as she tried to repeat it. Son. Something about hearing her say his name made his chest feel tight. He forced himself to focus. They could not stay in this cold ruin. He had to get her back to the ship. Maybe the computers there could help translate her language. Mason stood and offered his hand. Tara hesitated, then placed her slender fingers in his. As he helped her stand, a warm current ran through his body, like an invisible thread pulling them closer. It was almost comforting. Almost. They moved carefully down the dark hallway. The walls seemed to watch them as they passed. When they stepped outside, Mason looked up at the dull sky. He had never felt so far from home. He pressed the come button on his wrist, but only static answered. The mountains around the city must have blocked the signal. He would have to walk Tara back to the ship without help. Step by step, they made their way across the cracked stones. Tara stumbled often. Each time she faltered, Mason caught her. Even when he let go, he felt her presence inside his mind, a soft echo of her thoughts brushing against his own. At the edge of the ruins, Mason stopped to catch his breath. Tara leaned on a broken wall and looked around. Her eyes grew wide, and she knelt to touch the ground. She began to draw shapes in the dust with her finger. Mason crouched beside her, watching as she traced a circle with lines reaching out like rays. Then she pointed to the mark on his hand into the circle. "You're trying to tell me something," he said softly. She nodded. She drew another shape, a smaller figure inside the circle, connected by a line. She tapped her chest, then touched his shoulder. Mason studied the drawing, trying to understand. Was the circle her world, or the bond? He was not sure. Tara's hand trembled. She closed her eyes, and Mason felt a wave of exhaustion pour through the link. He knew she could not stay out here any longer. He had to move. He reached out and lifted her gently. She did not resist. Her head rested on his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. As he carried her across the rocky ground, he thought about the city's last moments. He wondered if she had been the only survivor, sealed in that capsule while everything she loved burned. When they reached the ship, Mason opened the hatch and laid her down on a padded bench. The soft lights inside made her silver skin glow faintly. He hurried to the controls and checked the life support systems. Everything was stable. Tara's eyes fluttered open. She looked around with wonder, touching the smooth walls and blinking at the lights overhead. Mason watched her, feeling a strange ache in his heart. She had lost her world, but somehow she was still here, still trying to connect. He sat across from her and pulled off his glove to study the mark again. It no longer glowed, but he could still feel it pulsing faintly under his skin. He pressed his palm to his chest, thinking of the vision she had shared with him. Her memories had become part of him now. Tara reached out and rested her hand over his. Her touch was gentle, almost shy. Mason felt a rush of warmth flow between them. For the first time since he had landed, he did not feel alone. He spoke softly. "I don't know why this happened to us, but I promise I'll help you." Her lips curved in the smallest smile. She closed her eyes and leaned back, her breathing slow and steady. Mason watched her for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the ship. He knew they would have to find a way to understand each other fully, and to survive whatever had destroyed her world. As he sat there, Mason realized the bond was more than a mark. It was a bridge between two lives that were never meant to meet. And now they had no choice but to walk across it together. Mason sat in the pilot's seat, staring at the controls. He knew he should take the ship back to orbit and call for help, but something deep inside told him it was not safe yet. His hands shook as he thought about the mark on his palm and the visions Tara had shared. She was resting on the bench behind him, wrapped in a blanket. Even when he looked away, he could feel her presence in his mind, like a soft light shining in a dark room. The bond was alive, and it was growing stronger every hour. Mason leaned back and rubbed his eyes. He had never felt so tired. He closed his eyes just for a moment. Suddenly, an alarm beeped on the console. Mason snapped awake. Red symbols flashed across the screen. He read the message twice, not believing it. Unidentified objects approaching. Distance, 900 meters. He turned on the external cameras. 3 small drones floated above the ruined city, their dark bodies glinting in the weak light. They moved in a slow circle, scanning every corner. Mason's mouth went dry. These machines looked old but dangerous. He glanced at Tara. She was awake now, watching the screens with wide eyes. When she saw the drones, she let out a soft cry and shook her head. Mason felt a wave of fear and sorrow wash over him through the bond. "You know them," he said quietly. Tara nodded. She pressed her hand to her temple, as if searching for words. Finally she whispered, "Hunters." Mason understood enough. These drones were not just machines. They were here to finish what had started long ago, to erase every trace of Tara's people. He turned back to the controls. "We have to get out of here." Tara reached for his arm. A vision hit him, memories that were not his own. He saw the drones firing bright beams of light, melting walls and stone. He felt her terror as she ran through the city, her friends falling behind her. The vision faded. Mason took a shaky breath. "I know you're scared, but I won't let them hurt you." He pressed the ignition. The engines hummed to life. The ship lifted off the ground slowly, its hull trembling. But before they could rise more than a few meters, the drones turned in unison. Red lights flickered beneath them, and thin beams of energy lanced toward the ship. Sparks exploded across the cockpit. Mason cursed under his breath and pushed the throttle forward. The ship jerked higher, smoke curling around the floor. "Hold on," he shouted. Ray clutched the bench, her eyes squeezed shut. Through the bond, Mason felt her fear mixing with his own. But he also felt her trust, warm and steady under the terror. One of the drones flew closer, scanning the hull. Mason knew it was only a matter of seconds before it fired again. He flipped open the weapons panel. His ship was not built for combat, but it carried a few defense charges. He armed one and locked onto the nearest drone. "Come on," he muttered, pressing the trigger. A bright pulse shot from the ship's underside. The drone exploded in a burst of sparks. Mason did not wait to see the pieces fall. He turned the ship toward the mountains, engines screaming as he forced it to climb faster. The remaining drones followed. Red beams flashed past the windows. One struck the rear stabilizer, and the ship lurched sideways. Tara fell against the wall, crying out in pain. Mason felt the impact echo through the bond, as if he had been thrown too. He gritted his teeth and steadied the ship. "We're almost there," he said. He didn't know if he was talking to her or himself. As they rose over the peaks, the sensors beeped again. More drones were approaching from the far side of the mountains. They were surrounded. Mason's heart pounded. He could not fight them all. He had to hide. He looked at Tara. She was staring at him, her silver eyes bright with urgency. She pressed her hand to her chest, then pointed down at the mountains. Mason frowned. "You know a place to hide?" She nodded. Her thoughts pushed against his images of a cave beneath the rocks, hidden by ancient technology. Mason closed his eyes and let the vision guide him. He saw the path as clearly as if he had flown it 100 times. "Hang on," he whispered. He tilted the ship sharply. The hull groaned under the strain. Lasers flashed past, but none hit. The ship dove down between two narrow cliffs. Wind roared around them, shaking the hull. Mason held his breath as he slipped into a deep canyon. Below, a wide crack opened in the rock. Tara touched the controls, her hand glowing softly. A hidden panel in the canyon wall shimmered and vanished. Mason guided the ship inside. As soon as they passed through, darkness swallowed them. The hidden doorway closed behind them, sealing them in complete blackness. Mason killed the engines and waited, listening to the pounding of his heart. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship's lights flickered back on, revealing a massive cavern. Strange symbols glowed on the walls, lighting the space in pale blue. Tara slumped forward, exhausted. Mason knelt beside her and checked her pulse. It was weak but steady. He touched her shoulder gently. "We're safe," he said. "For now." She opened her eyes and looked at him with a mixture of relief and sadness. Through the bond, he felt her gratitude, but also the heavy truth that this was only the beginning. The drones would not stop searching. Mason stood and walked to the window. Outside, the darkness seemed endless. He knew he had crossed a line the moment he landed on this planet. Now he and Tara were connected by something he still could not fully understand. But one thing was clear. They could not survive alone. He looked back at her, thinking of the visions she had shared and the way her thoughts had mixed with his own. He felt the bond pulsing between them, warm and alive. Whatever happened next, he knew he would not abandon her. And deep inside, he felt she would not abandon him either. The hidden cavern was silent except for the soft hum of Mason's ship. Pale blue lights shimmered along the rocky walls, casting long shadows over the floor. Mason sat in the co-pilot seat, rubbing the mark on his palm. It had stopped glowing, but he could still feel it warm, like a small heartbeat inside his skin. He looked over at Tara. She was asleep on the bench, her silver hair spread over the blanket. Her breathing was slow and even. Mason wondered what she was dreaming. He hoped, wherever her mind had gone, it was a better place than this cold, lonely cavern. He leaned back and closed his eyes. The last few hours felt like a strange dream. He had come here to scan rocks and record data, not to find an alien woman with a bond that tied them together forever. He wondered what Command would say if they knew. But a small voice in his heart told him he had done the right thing. The silence was broken by a soft chime from the ship's translator. Mason opened his eyes and checked the screen. The computer had been listening to Tara's words since she first spoke. Now, after hours of analysis, it had finally started to piece together her language. A list of simple words appeared. Name, Tara Bond, Hunter City Memory. Escape. Mason read the words again and again. Each one felt heavy with meaning. He knew Tara had tried to tell him so much more, but this was a start. He turned to look at her. As if she felt his gaze, her eyes slowly opened. They were bright silver, reflecting the blue lights. She looked tired but calmer than before. When she saw the screen, she lifted her head. Mason spoke carefully, pointing to each word. Tara, Bond, Hunter, Memory. She nodded, understanding. She pressed her hand over her heart. Bond, she whispered. He held up his palm, showing her the mark. Bond, he repeated. Her eyes softened. For the first time, Mason felt something gentle pass through the bond like the warmth of a quiet fire. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He took the small touch screen from the console and passed it to her. She studied it with curiosity. Carefully, she traced a shape on it with her finger, a tall tower with rays around it. She looked at him, her expression serious. What is it? Mason asked. She closed her eyes, and another vision filled his mind. He saw the same tower, rising over a bright city. The air was full of singing voices. Then darkness swept in like a storm. The tower flickered and went dark. Mason felt her sorrow so clearly that he had to look away. When the vision ended, he rubbed his eyes. That tower, was it important to you? Tara nodded. She drew another shape on the screen, a circle with a line pointing away. She tapped her forehead, then pointed to his. Mason understood. It was a memory, one she had shared with him. He thought about the word on the translator, memory. Can you show me more? He asked softly. She hesitated. Her fingers tightened on the blanket. Mason felt her fear and exhaustion, but then she nodded. She reached out and placed her hand over his. The mark on his palm warmed, and another vision rose in his mind. He saw her standing with others like her. They were taller than humans, with shining skin and gentle faces. They wore flowing clothes and held small devices in their hands. He felt her pride as she looked up at the tower, glowing in the sky. He understood that it was more than a building. It was a beacon, a symbol of hope and unity. Then the vision darkened again. He felt her panic as shadows fell over the city. Black ships drifted down, and the drones the hunters poured out in swarms. He heard screams and saw people running. He felt Tara's heart break as she was pulled away from her friends, forced into the capsule that had become her prison. The vision faded, and Mason gasped. Tears burned in his eyes. He looked at her and saw tears in her eyes too. He reached out without thinking and took her hand. Through the bond, he felt the echo of her loneliness. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." She closed her eyes, pressing her forehead to his hand. For a long moment, they sat in silence, sharing the same pain. Mason realized he was no longer just a stranger who had found her. He was part of her story now. When she looked up again, her expression had changed. There was sadness, but also something stronger determination. She spoke, voice soft but steady. "Escape," Mason frowned. "Escape?" She nodded and tapped the screen again. She drew a star with lines reaching out in every direction. Then she drew the same tower as before. She looked at him, her eyes bright. "You want to find the tower?" "Again," he guessed. Or another place like it." "Escape," she repeated, tapping the star. Mason understood. She believed there was still hope out there. Maybe a hidden refuge, or others of her kind. If the hunters had destroyed everything, why was she still alive? Why was the bond so important? He didn't know the answers, but he felt her faith and knew he couldn't turn away. He stood and walked to the controls. "Then we'll find it," he said. "But first, we need to get past the drones. They're still out there." Tara pushed herself to sit up. Though her body was weak, her eyes were clear. She touched her chest, then pointed to the ship's walls. Mason felt another wave of meaning through the bond. She was trying to tell him something about the cavern. "You know this place?" he asked. She nodded. She placed both hands over her heart and closed her eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the walls of the cavern began to glow brighter. Symbols lit up, moving in graceful patterns. The air felt warmer. Mason stared in awe. "You're controlling it." Tara opened her eyes, breathing hard. "Home," she said softly. "Home." This hidden place was part of her people's last refuge. Mason felt hope stir in his chest. Maybe there were answers here, plans, tools, anything to help them survive. He sat down beside her and took her hand again. The bond pulsed between them, steady and strong. "We'll find a way," he promised. Mason did not sleep that night. He sat in the pilot's seat, watching the cavern walls flicker with slow, pulsing lights. The ship was quiet except for the soft hum of the power systems. Every time Mason closed his eyes, he saw the vision of Tara's city burning. He wondered if those hunters were still searching outside. He turned and looked at Tara. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her hands resting in her lap. Her silver eyes were closed, and she was breathing slowly, as if she were in a deep meditation. The blue mark on Mason's palm glowed softly. Every few moments, he felt a small wave of calm from her thoughts. It was strange, but comforting. "Tara," he said quietly. Her eyes opened. She tilted her head, waiting for him to speak. "I need to know," Mason continued. "Why did you say the bond is complete? What does it really mean?" Tara looked at him for a long time. Then she placed her hand over her heart. Slowly, she pressed her palm to his chest. Mason felt a warm pressure in his mind. Like a door opening. Images began to flow into his thoughts. He saw two figures standing beneath a bright sky. Their hands were joined, and a blue light glowed between them. He felt their connection deeper than friendship, stronger than any promise. The bond was life itself, tying their hearts and minds together. The image changed. One of the figures fell to the ground, their light fading. The other figure screamed as the bond flickered and died. Mason felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if he were the one losing everything. Tara pulled her hand away, breathing hard. Eyes were sad but steady. "If one dies," she whispered. "Both ... end." Mason swallowed. His mouth felt dry. "You mean ... if something happens to me, you'll..." She nodded. He looked at the floor. A heavy silence filled the ship. He had thought the bond was just a link to help them share thoughts. He hadn't known it was this strong, this final. "I'm sorry," Tara said, her voice shaking. "It was ... only way." Mason took a slow breath. He wanted to be angry, to tell her this was too much. But when he looked at her, he saw how tired she was, how much she had lost. The bond had been her only hope to survive the end of her world. He reached out and took her hand. "I don't blame you," he said softly. "We'll figure this out together." Her eyes glistened. For a moment, the bond warmed between them like a small fire. A sudden beep from the console broke the moment. Mason turned to check the sensors. His stomach tightened. The scanner showed movement outside the hidden cavern. 3 signals were sweeping over the mountains. Drones. "They found us," he muttered. Rue stood quickly. Her face was pale. "Hunter." Mason tapped the controls, switching to the exterior cameras. The screen showed a narrow slit of daylight where the hidden door met the rocks. A red light flickered outside, passing back and forth like an eye searching for prey. He looked at Tara. "If we try to fly out, they'll spot us immediately." She closed her eyes, thinking. Her hands moved in slow gestures, drawing shapes in the air. Mason felt her thoughts brushing as a plan forming, but dangerous. "What is it?" he asked. She touched his forehead, then pointed to her own. "Bond ... strong." She whispered. Mason frowned. "Strong how?" She placed both hands over her heart, then reached out and pressed them to the ship's wall. The pale blue symbols began to glow brighter. A hum filled the cavern, deeper and stronger than before. Suddenly, a vision filled Mason's mind. He saw Tara standing in the heart of a great hall. Around her, others of her kind were joining hands, their voices rising in song. Blue light flared between them, forming a shield that shimmered over the city. The hunter's beam struck it again and again, but the shield held. The vision vanished. Mason looked at Tara in shock. "You can make a shield?" She nodded, breathing hard. "With bond ... stronger," she said. "But ... dangerous." "How dangerous?" Her hands shook. "Takes ... all strength, maybe ... life." Mason's heart pounded. He understood what she was saying. If they used the bond to power a shield, it might drain them both until there was nothing left. He closed his eyes. Part of him wanted to run, to find another way. But another part, deeper and stronger, knew he could not leave her to face this alone. He took her hands gently. "If we do this ... we do it together." Tara looked into his eyes. Slowly, she nodded. They moved to the center of the ship. Mason sat down and closed his eyes. Tara knelt in front of him and placed her hands over his. The bond pulsed between them, warm and steady. "Ready?" he whispered. "Ready," she said. The moment he closed his eyes, the world changed. He felt her thoughts, bright and strange, mixing with his own. Memories flowed past him, her people's laughter, the smell of the crystal halls, the songs of her childhood. He felt her fear, her hope, her quiet strength. And through it all, he felt her trust in him. Outside, the drones drew closer. Red beams began to sweep over the hidden door. Mason felt Tara focus, her mind sharpening like a blade. "Now," she whispered. He joined his thoughts with hers fully. The bond flared bright and hot. A deep hum filled the ship. Blue light burst out from the hull, spreading over the cavern walls. Mason felt power rushing through his body, almost too much to bear. The first drone fired. A beam of red energy struck the rocks, but the blue shield flickered into place, holding strong. Mason gasped. His body felt heavy, as if he were sinking into the floor. But he held on. He would not let go. Another beam hit. The shield flashed again. He felt Tara's strength weakening, her mind trembling. He reached for her through the bond, giving her all the courage he had. "I'm here," he whispered in his mind. "I won't leave you." The third beam struck, brighter than the rest. Mason cried out, feeling the shield shudder. But it did not break. Then, as quickly as it had come, the attack stopped. The drones hovered for a moment, scanning. And then, one by one, they turned and drifted away into the sky. Mason collapsed to the floor, breathing hard. Tara fell beside him, her hand still clutching his. They lay there in silence, the shield slowly fading around them. He turned his head to look at her. She was pale, her eyes half closed. But she was alive. "Together," she whispered weakly. "Together," Mason echoed, closing his eyes. For now, they had survived. But he knew this was only the beginning of their fight. Mason woke slowly. His head felt heavy, and his muscles ached as if he had carried a great weight. The soft blue glow of the cavern was gone. Now only the ship's emergency lights shone, blinking gently in the darkness. He tried to sit up, but his arms would not move right away. His heart raced until he remembered what had happened. The shield, the drones, the bond. "Tara?" he croaked, voice hoarse. A weak voice answered from the floor near him. "Here." He turned his head and saw her lying beside him. She looked as exhausted as he felt, her silver hair tangled and her skin pale. But she was alive. Relief washed over him. He swallowed and forced his body to sit. Every movement sent little shocks of pain through his limbs, but he did not care. He needed to see that she was safe. Carefully, he reached for her hand. Her fingers were cold, but they closed around his. He felt the bond flicker weakly, like a candle almost out. "You okay?" He whispered. Tey nodded slowly. "Weak but alive." They stayed like that in silence, their hands joined, breathing together. Mason felt her thoughts brushing against his tired, but steady. At last, he looked toward the console. The scanners were still active, though the signal was faint. He pulled himself up, every muscle protesting. The screen showed no red marks. The drones had left the mountains. "For now we're safe," he said, though his voice did not sound certain. Tara sat up with effort. She closed her eyes and placed her hand over the mark on her chest. Mason felt her searching for something, memories or strength. He could not tell. After a long moment, she opened her eyes. They were clearer than before. She pointed to the screen and spoke slowly. "They will come back." Mason's stomach tightened. He knew she was right. The hunters would not give up. They would keep searching until nothing was left. "Then we can't stay here," he said. Tey nodded. She reached for the small touch screen again and began to draw. First, she traced the star, then the tall tower, the same beacon she had shown him before. But this time, she added something new, a line running away from the tower, ending in another star. She looked at Mason and pressed her hand to her forehead. "Memory," she whispered. He leaned closer. "You remember where it is?" Her eyes shone with hope. "Yes, safe place. Maybe others." Mason felt a spark of energy in his tired chest. If she was right, maybe not all her people were gone. Maybe there was still a refuge out there. "But it is far," she continued. Far across stars. Mason turned back to the ship's systems. The engines were still working, but the power reserves were low. He tapped the fuel readouts, frowning. "We don't have enough energy to cross a whole sector," he said quietly. Tara looked at the glowing lines on the screen. Her expression was calm, but Mason felt her sadness through the bond. She knew the truth. Without more power, the hunters would find them eventually. He sat down and buried his face in his hands. For the first time since this began, he felt truly defeated. Then Tara's hand touched his shoulder. When he looked up, she was watching him with steady eyes. "Bond," she whispered and placed her palm over the mark on his hand. He frowned. "The bond?" She nodded. Slowly, she drew another shapeless circle with lines reaching out in all directions. She touched the mark on his palm again, then pointed to the ship's systems. Mason stared at her. "You're saying ... the bond can power the ship?" Her voice was very soft. "If ... we join fully, minds ... hearts ... life." He felt a cold chill run through him. He knew what she meant. If they merged completely, their thoughts would become one. The bond would grow so strong that it could feed the ship's engines. But there was a cost. He searched her face, trying to find the right words. "If we do that ... what happens to us?" Tara lowered her gaze. "No more ... separate." Mason felt his throat tighten. He imagined it, his memories and feelings mixing with hers forever. No walls between them. No way to hide any part of himself. It was more than trust. It was surrender. For a moment, he thought about refusing. He thought about trying to hide again, to wait for rescue. But deep inside, he knew that was foolish. No one was coming for them. They only had each other. And when he looked at her again, he saw no fear in her eyes, only quiet strength and hope. He took a long breath. "If this is the only way to survive," he said softly, "then ... I single quotes, not afraid." Tara reached out, her hand trembling. Mason closed his fingers around hers. "We do this together," he whispered. "Together," she echoed. They moved to the center of the ship and knelt facing each other. The lights overhead flickered as the ship sensed the surge of energy already beginning to grow. Mason felt his heart beating so fast he thought it might burst. Tara placed both palms over his. She closed her eyes, and the mark on their skin flared to life-bright blue, brighter than ever. Mason felt a warmth spread through his chest. He tried to hold on to his own thoughts, but they were slipping away, blending with hers. He felt her. Memories again, her childhood laughter, her mother's songs, the pride she had felt when she first became a guardian. He shared his own memories in return, his first flight in space, the lonely nights in the academy, the quiet dream of finding something bigger than himself. Tara's voice sounded in his mind. Soft and clear. "You are not alone." Mason closed his eyes as tears burned. "Neither are you." The bond pulsed one last time. He felt the ship's engines stir awake, drinking in the power. Blue lights raced along the walls, filling the cavern with bright, dancing reflections. Somewhere outside, Mason knew the hunters were still searching. But it didn't matter anymore, because in that moment, joined as one, they were stronger than any darkness. Blue light filled the hidden cavern as the bond between Mason and Tara grew brighter and stronger. It felt as if the ship itself was alive, breathing with their joined hearts. Mason could not tell where his own thoughts ended and hers began. Felt her memories swirling with her dreams, her fears, her hope that somewhere beyond the stars, her people might still be alive. And she felt his loneliness and his wish to belong to something greater. "Ready?" Tara's voice whispered in his mind. "Ready," Mason answered. The engines roared to life, louder and clearer than ever before. The walls glowed bright blue, the symbols dancing in long lines across the rock. A low hum rose up from the floor, vibrating through their bones. Mason opened his eyes and looked into hers. In that moment, he felt no fear. He knew they were one now, bound together forever. Whatever waited for them out there, they would face it as a single spirit. Tara pressed her hands to the controls. Mason joined her, their fingers touching the same panels. Through the bond, he felt how she guided the energy like a musician guiding a song. The ship lifted from the cavern floor, rising slowly toward the hidden door. Outside, the scanner showed a cluster of red lights moving over the mountains. The hunters had returned, searching again. But this time, Mason did not feel the cold fear that had haunted him before. He felt strong. He felt complete. As the ship reached the hidden exit, Tara's eyes closed. A soft blue glow spread from her palms across the control panel. Mason felt the power flow through him, through her. Through the ship itself, the hidden door shimmered and dissolved. Daylight spilled in. 3 drones floated beyond the rocks, their dark bodies turning at once to face the ship. Red beams flickered beneath them, ready to fire. Mason and Tara shared a single thought: no more running. Together they pressed, their hands flat against the console. The mark on their palms blazed bright as a star. The first drone fired. A thin beam of energy sliced through the air, but before it could strike the hull, a bright shield flared around the ship. The beam hit the barrier and scattered into harmless sparks. The other drones fired too, but their attacks were just as useless. The shield pulsed with the strength of their joined hearts. Go, Mason thought. Go, Tara agreed. He felt her mind guiding the engines, calling up the last reserves of the ship's power. The bond fed that energy, multiplying it until the engines glowed bright blue. The ship rose higher. The drones moved to block the path, but Mason and Tara felt no fear. With a single thought, they directed the engines to surge forward. A bright flash burst through the canyon as the ship shot into the sky, faster than it had ever flown. The wind screamed past the hull. The ground fell away, the mountains shrinking below. Mason felt the pressure in his chest as the ship climbed higher and higher, breaking through the thin clouds. Tara's hand clutched his, her thoughts steady and strong. Almost there, she whispered in his mind. Above them, the darkness of space was waiting. At last, the ship broke free of the atmosphere. Stars burst into view, a sea of bright points, stretching in every direction. Mason stared out through the cockpit glass, feeling a quiet awe. Tara reached for the navigation controls. Her fingers traced a path across the star chart, stopping at a distant point. A soft tone sounded coordinates locked. Mason felt her hope growing inside him. This was the place she had dreamed of, the safe world where her people might still be alive. He took a deep breath. It's far, he said aloud. She nodded. But together, we can reach it. He squeezed her hand. Then let's go. The engines hummed as they prepared for the jump to faster-than-light travel. Mason felt the bond gathering strength, wrapping around them like a warm blanket. A soft voice spoke through the ship's translator, repeating Tara's words, "Journey. Home." He looked at her, and for a moment, he forgot they were from different worlds. All he saw was a friend, a partner, someone who had trusted him when she had nothing left. Tara placed her other hand over his heart. Mason closed his eyes. The engines flared with blinding light. Stars stretched into long streaks around them. In that moment, Mason felt everything: her memories of the shining city, her love for her people, her faith that life could begin again. He shared his own memories with her, the first time he saw the Earth from orbit, the quiet promise he had made to himself to never turn away from someone in need. And then, at last, he felt peace. The ship slipped into the faster-than-light corridor. Blue light wrapped around the hull as space itself seemed to open a path just for them. Hours passed, or maybe only moments. Time felt strange here, like a river flowing in every direction at once. But Mason never felt lost. He could always feel Tara's thoughts beside his own, guiding him, steady as a heartbeat. When the ship emerged into normal space again, the darkness outside had changed. A bright star glowed ahead, its light falling over a small blue world. Mason's breath caught in his throat. He turned to Tara. Her eyes were full of tears, shining like liquid silver. Through the bond, he felt her joy and her sorrow, so many memories she could never get back, but also the hope that this place could be the start of something new. Mason reached out and wiped one of her tears away. "We made it," he whispered. She took his hand and held it tightly. "Together," she said. The ship drifted toward the waiting planet. Mason watched the blue oceans and green lands slowly grow larger. He did not know what they would find on that surface. Maybe ruins, maybe survivors, maybe nothing at all. But as long as they were joined, he knew they could face whatever waited. There, the bond between them pulsed steady and warm. Mason closed his eyes and let the feeling fill his heart. He had come here as a lone explorer, searching for answers in the dark. But now, at the edge of a new world, he was no longer alone. He knew that whatever happened next, this was only the beginning.